Back to Python tutorial. In this tutorial, we're going to continue on Python operators, useful operators, right? So now we're going to go over the zip function, right? So how do you zip two files together or two list items together, right? So what do you do? So zip is actually like your regular zip in your folder in your desktop, right? If you want to zip two folders together, that is actually how you do it here. So you technically join them together to make them into one. All right, so let's get started. So to zip two folder, we'll create my list. I'll say this is my list, and since we have learned the range function, we'll use the range function. I'll say list, and we cast it inside the range, right? And then we'll say give me a number from 0 to 5, and we run. So when I call my list, right, just to show you, when I call my list, and then you see is 0 1 2 3 4, right? 5 exclusive, right? So I will copy these and I will say this is list 1, and I say give me a number from 5 to 10, right? Remember 10 will not be inclusive because the stop is exclusive, right? Then when I come here and I say my list 1, and I run, of course you see 5 6 7 8 9. All right, so now I want to zip these two together, my list and my list 1, right? So all I have to do, I say my list 1 and I say zip, right? And remember your parentheses, right? Since it's if a function, right? Then you say my list and my list 1. All right, then when I run this, right, look at what happens. It does not produce a list. It always tells us that your list is stored at this location, right? At this location. All right, so how do you get access to this list? So what you have to do is you use the for loop. You loop through it and you say all right, so let me give a little bit of space here, and then okay, and you say for item in, and let's go back. All right, for item in zip, right, my list and my list 1, and you have this your colon, and you say print, right? Then you print my item, and then you run. Of course, it returns back a tuple, right? Remember when I went over tuple, I said that this is actually important because many Python functions actually returns back a tuple. So actually what you can do here, you can do tuple unpacking, you can do A, and then you have a comma, then you do B, and here you can come here and you do print A, right? And of course returns the first zipped file. All right, so how about you want to zip a letter with a digit? So how do you do that? So you can say my letter, and this is equal to, then you have your list, you have your list, and you say A, comma B, comma, then let's say C. Okay, so as you can see, this is my list, which is 1 2 3 4 5, right? And this is 1 2 3. Then I want to zip them together and they are not equal. What will happen? Let's see. Then you say zip, you say zip, and you say my list, my list, then you have comma my letter, right? And then let's iterate through it, and we'll say for item in zip, right? And then you have your semicolon, your colon, and then you say print item, and you run. Of course, so as you can see, it stops at the very least one, right? The lowest one, as you can see here, is A, B, C, and since you are zipping them together, this 3 and this 4 is not among, right? It stops at where the lowest one stops. So if my letter stops at 2, this this zipped file will stop at 1, right? So this is how it actually runs. So you can zip whatever you want and however you want it. So you can actually zip these 3 together, right? You can zip okay, so let's say you want to zip 3 items, and you say my list 1, and then you zip them. Of course, you have, then if you want to, you have it like this, and then if you want to do the tuple unpacking, then you all you have to say is A, B, C, right? Then when you run and you say print A, right, you run, you have these, then let's copy these, and then and then you say print B, right, and then you have that is printed. Then you can say okay, print C, right, and print C, and then you run, and of course it is here. So as you can see, it just distribute them 0A51 and all of that. So the next Python operator we want to consider is the in operator, right? So the in operator, so I'll just like write it here and use this markdown and run. Okay, so we'll have the in operator. So what is the in operator used for? It is used to check if an element is in if a word, if an element, if a word, or if anything is inside a list or a dictionary or just a group of words. All right, so let's check it out. So let's say A, let's say A, and then we'll have is A in Anderson, right? Anderson, then I run. Of course, it returns true, right? So it's like it iterates through these and returns true. So if I do something like is E in Anderson, then of course it returns true. Then if I say something that is false, like is Z in Anderson, it returns false, right? It actually returns a boolean, right? So now let's do something similar, and we'll say is A, right? Is A in Anderson. Let's run, and of course you see false. As you can see, there's a little there's a small letter A here, but this is capital letter A, so it returns false because it's telling that, like, hey, Python is case sensitive, right? So if it is uppercase and you are using lowercase to check, it's going to return no, like it's false as an answer. All right, so we can actually check it within a list, and we'll say is the number 12, and then we'll do something like create a list. We'll say 1, 2, 3, 4, 10, and we run. It returns false, right? So but when I say like something like 12 and run, it runs true. Okay, so we can also use the in word to check a dictionary, right? We can say can ask is, okay, let's do it like this. Let's say dictionary, and dic is equal to let's create a dictionary, and we'll say K1, right? Let's say K1 or K2. I'll say this is 1, 2, 3. I have a comma, and we'll say something like K3, and we'll have these, and we have 4, 5, and then I want to ask, to say is 35 in dictionary. What was that? In dictionary, right? And we run. Of course, it returns false, right? And then we can check if 123 is there, and it returns false. And it might be imagine and say, why is this returning false, right? Why is this returning false? And something else you can do is that this one is values, right? So if I do something like K2 and run, returns true. That is to tell you that it is not actually accessing the value. So how do you access the values, right? So actually you can say is okay, let me just copy these and paste it here and take out this one and say 1, 2, 3 in dic.values, right? I have my parentheses and I run. Of course, you see it's true, right? it comes out as true because we have been able to access the values, right? So you can also do the similar thing and be like, okay, is indeed dot keys, right? Have these and run. Of course, returns true. So if you put something that is untrue and something like k5, of course it returns false. Dot keys, although it works like that, but let's just use the function keys, and of course it returns false. All right, so something else we want to look into is the min and max, right? And of course it's being highlighted because it's a keyword in Python. And we'll run. Okay, so let's say num, right? And we num, and we say okay, let's use a range function. I will say list. Let's say list and range, and then we'll also say okay from 100, right? And we'll run, and we'll call my num, and we'll have these. Okay, we'll say 10 here. Wow, let's say 100, and then run and run, and it's like this. We'll have this long list. Then I want to return the minimum value, so all we have to say is let's cast these, but maybe that 100 is too much. Let's say 20. All right, so yeah, 20, it works. So now let's return the minimum, and all we have to do is, okay, let me come here and I'll say minimum. It returns the minimum value in the num, and then we'll run. Of course it's 0. Then if we want the maximum number, then we'll say maximum number in num, and then we have in num, and then we run. Of course it's 19. All right, so something else we want to quickly go over again is the shuffle. So in order to do this is the first time we're actually importing a library. So let's say from random, right, import the shuffle. All right, so something I want you to look at is when I do this, right, you can see all the libraries you can import, right? All of them are here. So we'll be going over them one after the other. For now, we want to do the shuffle, right? And now I want to shuffle the num, right? So when I run this, then I say okay, I say something like shuffle num, right? And I run. Okay, so look, the num is 0, 1, 2 to 19, right? So when I call on num, and of course you see it has been shuffled. So when I run this, and when I run this shuffle and I run this one again, of course it reshuffles it. So every time you run this one and run it, it shuffles again. All right, so another thing we want to look at is random integer. It is a very useful operator, right? Random integer. So we'll say this is random integer, right? That is rand 8, right? So when I run this, then I say that's okay. Okay, that's okay. Round it. I'm just thinking of something to use, and I say round it. Give me a random integer. Give me a random number from between 20 and 20 and let's say 500, and I run. Of course, you have 23, right? Then when I run this again, you have 161. Then when I run this again, this you have 22. And I run this again, it's 100. So you're actually telling Python like, hey, give me a random integer between this number and this number. All right. So the last one is that we have actually looked at it, like we've used it to solve a problem, is the input method, right? The input method. So let me run this file. Let me do a markdown. Then I do this. Then this is actually used to get an input from a user, right? So I say user is equal to, then I say input, right? Then we'll have these, and I say please enter your username, right? Then I run this, then it say please enter your username, and I say Anderson, and then enter, and of course you say Anderson. So we can actually format these, right? We can actually format these, and I say here, and I come over here, and I say okay, to make it look good. And I say enter your username. I say Anderson, and I run. Of course, you see Anderson. So let's say I want to get an integer. So all I have to do is come over here and say please enter an integer, right? An integer. Then all I have to do again to make sure that this is an integer, and to make sure that the user doesn't put anything, any other thing apart from the integer, then I just have to come over here and I say int. Yeah, something like this. No, I'm sorry about that. I say integer input, right? It comes before the input, and then I say please enter an integer. All right, then colon, then I run. Of course, you see. So when I try to put, okay, let me do this first, and I put 13 and I enter, it works because it's an integer. Then when I run this and I put something like, of course, you see, it shows an error, right? Invalid literal for integer, right? With base 10. Okay, so that is trying to show you that this is not it's not valid. So when I run this, and you have to enter just an integer, so when I click on enter, it works, right? So let me use a floating point, and I say 12.0 and see what it will say. All right, it's showing error again because you can use integer to get a float, right? Sorry, you can use a float to get an integer, but you can't use an integer to get a float, right? Because it doesn't make sense actually. So when I run this and I say 34 and I enter, then let me quickly show you a floating point, right? A floating point, and then change this to float, and then we run. Then I say 23, which is an integer. I enter, I produce 23 without an error, right? So when I do this and I say 12.0, so basically when you're trying to get something like a height, the weight of a person, something that has to do with that you can have a decimal point within it, right? So just use a floating point. But when it is like something like an age, that is an integer, you can just use the integer. So by default, the input method is a string, right? But you can also always enclose it within a string, and it will give you the same thing. All right, so this is it for Python operators, and I know this video is long, but thank you so much for watching along, and I hope you really learned something from it. I will see you on the next one.